It is step 12, and I'm just looking forward to experiencing it with you. Thank you, Gary. Go ahead.
Thank you, and forgive my smart mouth. God, I hope it's not my last night. It's just going to be the last night I get to spend with y'all. I hope I've got another night or two left in me. But we never know, do we? I am an alcoholic. My name is Gary Kincaid. And I am really, really, really grateful for a sobriety date and for a new life that started July 25th, 1994. And a couple of personal things first. We're now over 22 months into Zoom and AA in a big way. And I'm certain many of you have been on some of the threads of recovery meetings and workshops. I mean, they've had stuff going 12, 16 hours a day, every day. Mike McKillop was a taper out of St. Louis, just a wonderful guy. And if you participated in any of those, Mike died of COVID this past weekend. Been very, very sad about that. He's a fantastic guy. And the other personal thing is I want to give each of you a big thanks. I have really enjoyed visiting. For as much as we can do on this, I feel like I could come to your home group. We could grab a cup of coffee, and in 3 minutes, we could pretty well be caught up. And I'll hope that opportunity, that we have that opportunity in the future. Who knows? The longer I've been here, the smaller the world gets as far as AA is concerned. For that, I'm very grateful. Step 12. I'm going to share again my experience with this step, and it's led me to an understanding of it that I have today. I go back to my experience of the people who brought me into the fellowship. The first guy, I went to him because I'd been back in Odessa about 3 years, and I was around this guy once or twice a week. And he was one of those kind of guys you weren't around him very long till you knew he was in AA. And you weren't around me very long if you're a member of AA to know that I needed to be in AA. But Joe never did strong arm me. He never did, you know, finger point. The reason when I had my moment of clarity on that Sunday, the 24th, I knew I had to go talk to Joe was more just in how I had seen him living in the community where I lived. I'd had opportunity to be in his home. I'd met his wife. I knew his friends. I knew some of the people at work. And this guy seemed to have a fantastic life. And that's what drew me to him. I guess you would say what drew me to him was the part of this step of practicing these principles in all our affairs. To the best of my knowledge, Joe was doing that. It made it very easy and very, not easy, but attractive for me when my time came. I knew somebody to go talk to. The second thing that I think about is in my first home group, they had the steps and they had the traditions and they had the concepts on those big boards on the wall. And after I'd been here, I don't know, maybe the first year, and I was in that room every day that first year. I was sitting in my seat one day and I looked at those steps and it hit me. The very first step of yours that I encountered in Alcoholics Anonymous was step 12. And I give the analogy of me when I was crawling in. And in relation to those steps on the board to the floor, the one I was closest to when I crawled in was the 12th step. And it wasn't mine, it was yours. And when I'd been here a few more years, I was in a As Bill Sees It meeting one day, and the reading was page 105 in As Bill Sees It. I'll read it short, I'll read the whole thing. To spend too much time on any one alcoholic is to deny some other an opportunity to live and be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with his first half dozen prospects. He often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. And here's the statement that leapt out to me that day in that meeting. Our chief responsibility to the newcomer is an adequate presentation of the program. I love that wording. Our chief responsibility is an adequate presentation of the program. If he does nothing or argues, we do nothing but maintain our own sobriety. If he starts to move ahead even a little with an open mind, we then break our necks to help him in every way we can. I believe I can say with what humility I can muster, and some days that's very little, that for the most part, since I've been with you folks, I've been able to provide an adequate demonstration of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. First, and for the longest time, in the room. And for these last many, many years, just importantly, if not more importantly, out of the rooms. And I love Bill's language there, that word adequate. Those of you who know me and are in meetings with me know that very often I'll talk about step 11. And I'll tell folks that as I do my evening review, and it is an open book test, we got the book right there. I'll look at my day, and on most days, I can grade my day a C plus or a B minus. Very seldom an A plus. I'm not a guy that's on the A plus honor roll in AA, and I'm telling you, I don't know anybody that is. A C plus is a pretty doggone good grade for a guy like me. And if I surrendered that 11th step, it's kind of like God graves on the curve as I do the corrections for that day. And I usually go to sleep with a pretty clear mind and wake up the next day to start another day. But if you're new here, there are no real hot shots in AA. There are no gurus. There's no people that have got it down and they're the ones that are doing it right. Now, I know some of the people on this screen, and I know from time to time each of us has felt that we were that person every now and then. But that word adequate, for me, is a very powerful word. The home group that I got into gave a very adequate presentation of the program. Now, another one of my first encounters with the step literally was my sponsor. And I guess I had about 2 months, and he was sharing a call from the floor meeting and asked me to read how it works. And I got up and read it. And as I was going back to my seat, he said something along the lines, I'm going to have to keep working with them. One of these days, he may read that the way Bill wrote it. And of course, I don't think he was putting me down, though that's all I thought about during that meeting. And later on, at his house, he had me read it again. And he said, no, read it the way he wrote it. Now, in my experience, folks, it took 3 readings before he gave up and showed me the corrections. And these are almost like swatting gnats. I'm not going out to meetings and telling people this is how you have to do it. I'm just sharing my experience. And the first part of it, I was reading it, that we're sharing about what it was like and what happened and what it is like today. And I read it that way every time until he pointed out to me. It says what we were like, what happened, and what we are like today. And with direct reference to the 12th step, he corrected me, and I was reading it having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. He pointed out the word "the." Now, again, I'm not telling anyone on here that that's going to make all the difference in your recovery, but that got imprinted on my mind that day, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And I've thought about that, and I've worked on that idea through the whole year. You know, as I read the book backwards, Bill says that a number of times, that lack of power was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. Obviously, it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Where and how are we going to find that power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. And maybe I'm real slow, but it took me a long time to discover that I have, and I've had it ever since I discovered it, a working relationship with a power greater than myself that I never even considered prior to you people. I'd considered God. I'd thought a lot about God, but the relationship that has been mine as a result of these steps is something that brings a lot of joy to my life. It means almost everything. And for me, it's the result. And everything else is kind of the dessert to the thing. The next thing that I'll share with you about my experience with this is I went to, and I'm going to go back in April. There's a conference to Fort Davis, Texas, which is, if you get a map and you put nowhere on it, Fort Davis is in the middle of nowhere. It's about 75 miles north of Old Mexico, in the Big Bend area, and it's just a place. Well, out in my part of the country, they hold a conference at that place twice a year, the fall ball and the spring fling. And I made the first 41 of those. In my first 20 years, I made every one of them before I'd moved by that time, about 700 miles away. Things came up where I couldn't go every time. But the very first one I made, this is for people that are new here, or for people who have moved recently, or for people who, for one reason or another during Zoom, have not gotten out to meetings and just haven't been using the telephone and the Zoom meetings in a way to build and maintain the fellowship that y'all given to me. That first conference I went to, I don't know, 6 weeks sober maybe. I didn't have a choice. It was one of those get in the car weekends. And I knew 7 or 8 people there, and they were all from my home group. People came from different home groups all over West Texas. And I remember being so alone because I was pretty sure that every time there was a group of people talking, they didn't want me there. So I was on the fringes, if you would. And on Saturday afternoon, they hold a cookout. And I distinctly remember getting my food and looking at all these picnic tables. And there wasn't an open spot anywhere where one of those 6 or 7 people that I knew was sitting. And a kind of fear in me of sliding into a table, picking an open spot with 7 or 8 people that I didn't know. Well, 3 years after that, a short 3 years, I was at that same cookout on that Saturday afternoon, sitting on the back of a wagon, watching the people, and I started counting. And I counted 81 people that I had their phone number, they had my phone number. I was cell phone. Some of y'all remember when we had to write down numbers. But in that short period of time, something had happened. And that something was your 12th step. Bill describes it many times in the book. But for me, one of the most succinct descriptions is on page 16, where he ends his story. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. But just underneath, there is a deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel that we need look no further for utopia. We have it right here and now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. If anybody had suggested to me when I first got here that I would be a part of this thing that is now worldwide, I've been to 4 of the internationals. I've had the opportunity to go to 2 foreign countries to conferences and tell my story. I've got friends in Iceland and England and Finland and Australia that I speak with regularly. And it's all a result. And you got to look at your own experience. And I know some of you from the last 3 months that we visited, you've had the same experience. It started with getting my ass totally kicked by alcohol, thinking it was the lowest day of my life, and going to talk to a guy that I knew was in AA who had never formally 12-stepped, but by the way he lived when I was around him. And most of the time it was work situation. He impressed me enough that I was willing to go visit with him. He brought me into AA, and I believe my life, and I believe your life, is a real representation that someone gave you and I an adequate presentation of the program. We had an old man down in San Angelo. His name was Cotton Lindsay. Cotton came to his first meeting of AA in 47 or 49. I can't remember. He got sober in 61, but he kept coming. And when I came in, he was kind of an icon there in the West Texas area. He was in San Angelo, and my sponsor went to speak in San Angelo when I was about 2 or 3 months sober. It was another get in the car time for me and a couple of his other sponsees. And when we got there, Jerry told me, he said, Gary, you're going to do the first 5 minutes tonight. Well, I panicked. It was hard enough for me to get behind the podium at a call for the floor meeting, much less a speaker meeting. And I never met Cotton before. And he came up to me. He was a small, withered old man, real bright eyes. He said, son, are you scared? And I said, yes, sir, I am. And he said, well, always remember this. It don't take much to help us. I have never forgotten that. I got a chance to know Cotton later on and to spend many, many hours with him before he died. And I asked him about that. And he said, it doesn't take much to help us. It's not ever going to be what you say. It's going to be that you were the one willing to spend the time with someone when what they needed most in their life was not someone to give them fantastic words, but someone willing to spend time with them. And I began to learn very early that one of the main things that y'all have given me as the result of these steps, as the relationship with a higher power, you've returned to me one of the greatest gifts I could have ever had. I no longer have to squander my time. That gift of time is so precious. And I'm talking to the choir when I say this. You and I know how much time we wasted prior to recovery, drinking or not drinking. Because almost every waking hour before you people, my time was mainly concerned with me. What's in it for me? What am I going to do? What am I going to get out of it? And to me, any time life is concerned with me, that's wasted. Y'all have given me back time. And I learned early on from going on 12-step calls with my sponsor. And he would usually say, I don't want you to talk. You just go with me. If he asks a question that I think you're going to have the answer to, I'll nod at you. And about half the time on those early 12-step calls, he didn't nod, but about every other time. And it would be into a question when the guy would say something like, what am I going to do when I'm not drinking? What's life going to look like? And he'd say, Gary, are you bored? I'd say, no, Jerry, I'm not. And that'd be it. Then he'd go back to talking to the guy. Some of those people have stayed sober over the years. And if you hear their story, they're going to talk about how grateful they were that I came to 12-step. And all the hell I did was sit in the room and maybe nod my head and say one or two things. But some of those 12-step calls, 2 or 3 hours, and they remembered the time. And I don't want to begrudge this or belabor this point, but I still believe today that's the most powerful gift that any of us shares with another person in their time of need. It's not our verbiage, it's our presence. And one of the greatest gifts of the 12th step in AA is y'all have allowed me to be present, not just in the meetings of AA, in the lives of my children and the lives of a granddaughter and the lives of other family. You know, I may have shared this one time before, but small talk, just sitting around chatting about things is something that it just makes me want to pull my hair out sometimes. And I just could not do that before recovery. You know, I'd go to see my grandparents or my aunts or my uncles. I love to go in the room. I love to hug them. I love to get the initial news. But then to sit around for 2 or 3 days and just talk about stuff, I don't know how to do that. My brother and my Aunt Wilda can sit around and talk about a new kind of light they found for their African violets, and they can talk about that stuff for 4 or 5 hours. And I just want to get a gun and blow my brains out. I just don't do small talk that way. I go over to southeastern Oklahoma where those two elderly aunts of mine live about every 3 weeks, and I'm able to go in and hug their necks and sit down with them and spend about 5 hours just talking about the stuff that they want to talk about. Mainly just being there. And here's the big word I'm trying to come to that I did not know how to do for you people. And for me, it's a huge part of practicing these principles in all my affairs. Just sitting with them and listening. I don't know why my whole life I thought that it was necessary for me, if I'm going to be important in someone's life, to have something to say. And y'all have taught me, the children have taught me, the granddaughter has taught me, those aunts and my brother have taught me that the greatest gift I can share with them is to just be there and to be able to listen and be real comfortable doing nothing at all. Now, if you're new here, I didn't get that in the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year, sixth. It took a long, long time. But each year it got a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more easier to do. I mean, I had to make myself do it. And today I don't have to make myself do it. I just look forward to it. And that's a part of practicing these principles in all our affairs. 3 other things on this. We'll go back to 12 stepping of alcoholics. We've got a good chapter on it. Each of you has had your own experience with it of either being 12 stepped or of doing it. I've always found myself in areas where it's a common part of my life, pretty much on a 2 or 3 times a month basis. And this is an opinion. I get 4 of those in these 12 weeks. So this will be my last opinion. And I don't remember the first 3, and hopefully y'all don't either. It's my opinion based on my experience that we in AA have really missed the boat on people coming through our doors for the first time. I'm in areas today where half of the ones that come in, the big majority of the group will look at them and say, there's a paper sign. What I was shown and the way I've been taught is no, there's not. There's a potential member of Alcoholics Anonymous. The opinion is, I believe that every person who walks into our room for the first time needs a complete 12-step call from a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it doesn't matter if they're coming through the door of the court sending them here, they still need a 12-step call. None of us know what we're walking into at the beginning. Neither do they. Most of them have only been told, you need to go to these classes. And I think we really missed the boat by not treating them like they're somebody that is 10 hours away from their last drink. People coming in off the street. Now, this is, again, is just my opinion. They need a full 12-step call. Read again, I won't read it to you, but page 18 of our book. An alcoholic properly armed with facts about himself can often win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a matter of a few hours. I can't tell you how many meetings I go to, and there are newcomers there, and what the group has to offer them is a packet with a bunch of phone numbers on it. Now, if you're an alcoholic like I was, I ain't going to read the damn packet. I'm damn sure not going to call the phone number. For me, that man or that woman needs one of us to say, let's go to the coffee shop, or give me your number, and that we pursue them until we find out if they're interested in finding a way to change their life and to not drink anymore. And the third door that a lot of people in my area come in through is from treatment centers. And it's just my experience. I don't care if somebody has been 6 months in an inpatient treatment center. When they walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, they need a 12-step call like they didn't know one thing about AA, because they may have been doing steps, but they haven't been in a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. They've not been doing it out here where the rubber meets the road. And it's just, again, it's an opinion for each of us to consider, that everybody that walks in the room ought to be afforded an adequate presentation of the program. And part of that adequate presentation is being approached and being greeted and being included and being interested and being willing to listen and being willing to be the one that spends that matter of a few hours that may be needed in order for them to make identification. So I'd hold that out to you. And I hope your memories are bad, because mine is, and I don't think I've told this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. It's a story of a family in the Depression era. You know, I'm the only one on here old enough to remember that era. The rest of you could Google it and get information on it. But it was a family that lived on a little farm and had an apple orchard. And the first year of the Depression, the mother got sick and died. And it was just the son, about 15 years old, and his dad. And they were poor. And the boy was slow. And his dad knew that if he was going to make it in the world, he was going to have some kind of trade. The only thing his dad could teach him was apples. And so he set out to teach him about apples. When the boy was 16, his father got sick and died, and he's left orphaned. The bank came out and took the farm back. The boy had to wander into the nearest largest town. And he's hungry and he doesn't know what he's going to do. He passes by the pool hall. And some ne'er-do-wells, the type that I was at one time, thought they would have some fun with him. And when he asked them what was, they said, yeah, go to the big house at the top of the hill. They're hiring. And they sent him to the local house of ill repute. He got up and knocked on the door, and the madam came to the door in this lingerie, and the boy's eyes are bugging out. She says, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am." He said, "I need a job." And she said, "You're in luck. We seem to be the only people in town making money at this time, and I need a bookkeeper." And the boy said, "Ma'am, I can't read, I can't write, I couldn't do that. Thank you, though." She said, "Well, you look hungry. Go in the kitchen, eat anything that's there, and take anything with you that you want to." And when he got in the kitchen, he saw a bushel of apples spilling over on the floor. And he didn't know much, but he knew apples. He got a bag and filled it full of those apples, went downtown, cleaned them up, ate a couple of them, and sold the rest. He took the money he sold and bought more apples. He did that same thing day after day. And after a short time, he had a little push cart. He's selling apples. And he did so well with those apples. A little while later, he bought an old truck. And on the side of the truck, it says, "We know apples." And within 10 or 15 years, you could see trucks going up and down the highways of that state. And on the side, it said, "We know apples." And he made so much money, he thought he ought to give some other away. So he went to a lawyer to develop a trust to give it away. When the lawyer called him back into his office, he said, "Now, sir, read this and sign it." The man said, "Son, I can't read or write." And the lawyer said, "You can't read or write? And you own this big corporation? Can you imagine what your life would be like if you could read or write?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd be a bookkeeper in a whorehouse." Now, I love that story to make this point. If I, and I'm going to presume if you, but if I were not an alcoholic, I wouldn't be anything at all. If I were not an alcoholic that had found an adequate presentation of our program to have my life changed, I might still be alive, but I wouldn't have any life. Every good thing that's mine since I've been with you people has stamps made in AA. And part of that 12th step for me, the way it was presented to me right away, is that, "Gary, you've got an illness." And then they started telling me about the illness. And they took away my victim card immediately. It's been my experience that's what the 12 steps do, is they take away our victim cards. And they lead us into a life that we never even dreamed was possible. I am never sad about being an alcoholic. I remember when I first got here, people would say, "I'm a grateful alcoholic." And I'd, under my breath, say, "Yeah, like hell you are." Well, stick around for a while. Read the third step out of the 12 and 20. Read where Bill talks about the gratitude we should have, because we found a way to live life, not just not drinking, but like it says in the forwards, 12 and 12. AA's steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if applied to the sufferer's life, will expel the obsession to drink and allow the sufferer to live a life happily and usefully whole. For me, that's the message that y'all have given me. And it's the message that we have to share with others. And I'm just so glad I'm an alcoholic. I can't hardly stand it. Otherwise, I don't know what I would be, but it wouldn't be anything that I want to be as I know it today. So I want to conclude this the way Bill concludes it in the 12 and 12. And someday, just for the fun of it, when you're sitting around, read the last page of the first legacy. our 12 steps. Page 164. I love the way it ends. Read the ending of our second legacy, the 12 traditions. And it's almost like they fit right in with where Bill ended up with the steps. And then read the very ending of our third legacy, the 12 concepts. And that could be one continuous writing. And it gives a message. But here's what Bill says about our 12 steps. These little studies of AA's 12 steps now come to a close. We've been considering so many problems that it may appear that AA consists mainly of racking dilemmas and troubleshooting. To a certain extent, that's true. We've been talking about problems because we are a problem people who have found a way up and out, and who wish to share our knowledge of that way with all who can use it. For it is only by accepting and solving our problems that we can begin to get right with ourselves and with the world about us and with Him who presides over us all. Understanding is the key to good living. Understanding is the key to right principles and attitudes, and right action is the key to good living. Therefore, the joy of good living is the theme of AA's 12th step. With each passing days of our lives, may every one of us sense more deeply the inner meaning of AA's simple prayer. God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and wisdom to know the difference. I end with that because I believe Bill could say it a whole lot better than I did. And for that, I thank y'all for allowing me to be a part of your life.